Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a video that I am scared of. If you read the title or saw the thumbnail, you already know why. For today's video, I'm going to be reading the books on my TBR that I am the most intimidated by. I'm going to be reading 5 books and I'm going to go ahead and show them to you guys and explain why I'm intimidated by them. Some of them are ones that I'm genuinely scared of reading. Others are ones that I've just been kind of putting off for no reason and I really don't know why I feel intimidated. Starting off, we have Emma by Jane Austen. And I think I've shown this book in several other videos. It has been on my TBR before, I believe. This is the most stunning version of this book I've ever seen. I mean, the pink sprayed edges are beautiful and I just love the foiling on the cover. I actually got this as a birthday gift from my fiance's family and I'm obsessed with how beautiful this book is, but I'm scared of reading it. One of the reasons I'm scared of it is because I recently have started my journey with classics. I would say I'm not a very big classic reader, but one of my goals for 2024 is to read at least 5 classics, and since I own a copy of this one and it's literally titled my name, I feel like it's only right that I do read this year. I am also just intimidated by the writing style. I read Little Women and absolutely loved it, but it did take a little bit for me to adjust to the writing style, and I've also heard people say that the main character in this book is not very likable, and I sometimes struggle reading books like that, and it's just really long, so that's the biggest reason I'm scared of reading this one. Honestly, I would say this one out of all of them is the one that I would have been most likely to just pick up and read anyway if it wasn't for a video. And the audiobook for this is also free on Audible, I believe, which is perfect. Hopefully I'm gonna love this one, but I definitely am really intimidated by it. So it's time to face my fears of classics. The next one on the list is a sci-fi book that I'm extremely intimidated by. I do think I will really enjoy this book, and I've owned this entire series for quite a while. I hear nothing but good things about it on the internet, but I also hear that it's very complicated. It has intricate politics and world building, and I also just don't read a lot of sci-fi. Red Rising, I'm very scared of it. I'm hoping that my extensive experience with the fantasy genre will help me to understand this book better. I know I'm gonna like it, but I'm still scared of it. But yeah, I've been putting this off for way too long, and honestly, I just need a reason to force myself to get around to it. The next one I'm intimidated by is probably the one on this list that I'm dreading the most, and that is Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. Now, if you've read this series or you know what this series is about, you might be wondering how this made it on my most intimidating books list, because this is just a romance book, but I read the first book almost 2 full years ago, so part of me is just scared to jump back in because I don't remember very much about it. I know people love this trilogy, although I do hear mixed reviews about this book and the third book, but I own the full trilogy, so I may as well read it at some point, and I really have been wanting to jump back into this world and just see what I think. Part of the intimidation comes from the fact that it's been so long since I've been in this series, and then the other part of it is that this is so long, and in my opinion, no contemporary romance book should be this long. Like, there's literally no reason. Something about that I think is the main reason why I've been putting it off, and I think I'm just scared that it's gonna take me forever to get through it and it'll put me in a reading slump. The fear is that I don't want to waste my time reading this. This is another one that I'm considering using an Audible credit on, so I can just listen to it in the background while I'm doing like little tasks throughout my day, and I feel like that'll help me get through it quicker. So we'll see, but I just need to force myself to read this one. I keep telling myself I'm going to. It's been on my monthly TBR multiple times and I just simply never read it. And then the last 2 books are part of the same duet, so that's why I'm including them both on here. These books are probably the books that, like, book talk in general, booktube, like, there is a general consensus that people are scared of these books, and I've even heard people go as far as to say they will never read these books, but I'm a person to never say never. So Haunting and Hunting Adeline, these are dark romance books. All I basically ever hear about these is that you need to look up trigger warnings, it's not for the faint of heart, and honestly, hearing all of that almost intrigued me to want to read it more. I will say, at the time of filming this, I have already finished Haunting Adeline, and I'm currently like halfway through Hunting Adeline. I will give my thoughts in a minute, but before starting this, I honestly was trying to be pretty open-minded, and I did go in somewhat blind. There were some things I knew about it, and there are also trigger warnings listed at the front of the books. I was definitely scared to read these just because there are such extreme mixed reviews about this. Some people absolutely love it, like it's their favorite series, and then some people hate it, say they feel disgusted by it. Crazy reviews is all I've ever heard about this. I was very intimidated by these, and I was planning on filming like my reactions and thoughts as I went through these books. I ended up taking Haunting Adeline to my fiance's house while I was there over the weekend. I only expected to read like 100 pages maybe, and then when I got home I could give my thoughts and reviews, and then update you guys as I went. But I ended up finishing this entire book that weekend, which really surprised me. I will say the majority of this book, I was kind of like confused why people were so disturbed by it, because I knew it was a dark romance, and even though I don't read a lot of dark romance, I do understand like tropes that are typically taking place in them, so nothing like threw me for a loop, nothing really shocked me. I will say about halfway through things started to get a little bit more dark, but honestly the romance aspect of it itself wasn't that disturbing to me. I feel like the thriller aspect of it was more the disturbing part of it. I struggle to even be able to call this book a dark romance, because to me it's more of a thriller with strong dark romance subplots. Don't get me wrong, the spice in this was not like anything I've ever read before. It definitely is dark romance, but I don't know, I didn't feel shocked or disgusted really, and I don't know if a lot of that is just because I had heard so much going into it that I was expecting like literally the worst of the worst. So then when I did read it, it seemed like almost more mild, I guess, than to the way people react to it and describe it. But yeah, I would say this was a thriller. I finished it. It to me wasn't the best book in the world. I wasn't obsessed with it, but it also wasn't awful. I think I gave it like 3 stars. Like, it really wasn't that bad. It was entertaining. Clearly I finished it pretty quick, and it definitely was one of those books that was a page turner. Like, even though I wasn't super invested in the characters, I was wanting to find out what happened next. In my head, I keep comparing this book to the movie Saltburn, not because they have anything in common, but because of the way I felt while reading / watching them. With the movie Saltburn, I had seen so many TikToks about how disgusting, disturbing, like all this stuff. People basically just going on and on and on about how much they felt disturbed by the movie. And then when I watched the movie, I was kind of just like, is this the movie that everyone's freaking out over? Like, yes, I knew there were disturbing things, but I also knew the movie was going to be a thriller. And it was like, I don't know, to me it wasn't that shocking, and I didn't understand what everyone was freaking out about, and that's kind of how I felt with this book too. And I really just do think I had heard so much about it, so many people saying how messed up it was, so then when I read it, it just seemed tame in comparison. I will say, the book is not tame by any means, and if you've never read dark romance before, I don't recommend starting with this one. Definitely look up trigger warnings, but going into this, I did know what trigger warnings to look for. I had a general idea of what the book was about, and I knew the genre was dark romance and thriller, so it wasn't like I was picking it up expecting it to be this fluffy, cute romance. I knew going into it that it was going to be dark, so I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion and it's just me, but I honestly did not feel that shocked by the book at all. It was like an entertaining read, definitely not my taste. Like, I don't think I would reach for books like this in the future necessarily, but yeah, unpopular opinion is just that it didn't really shock me or impact me that much. I kind of just felt meh about it, but yeah, it was entertaining. It was a page turner for sure. Kept me on the edge of my seat, so I did give it a 3-star for that. And then I decided to jump immediately into Hunting Adeline, and you know how I said that one's like a thriller with dark romance? This one so far is like a horror with dark romance. This one I actually do feel disgusted and repulsed by, and it's shocking and it's disturbing. This one makes the first one seem like a fluffy, cute romance, because the things that are taking place in this are so disturbing and are told in such detail that I literally have felt sick to my stomach while reading it. This one is significantly darker than the first one, and I believe the author's note at the beginning even warns readers away from reading it. Trigger warnings are listed in the front, so if you're interested in reading them, definitely read the trigger warnings before reading this, because it's some pretty heavy stuff. It's very dark, and this one is even less of a romance so far compared to the first one. It is basically just horror. I would say the first like 300 pages of this book are just absolutely disgusting and unnerving and literally terrifying. I am into part 2 of the book now, where things are starting to be a little bit more lighthearted in comparison. I don't know if you can even call it lighthearted, but it's definitely not as dark and scary and just nasty as the first half of the book. It's more back to a similar plot and similar storyline of what was happening in the first book. Definitely understand where people are coming from saying it's super disturbing. I think even if I would have known what was going to happen, I would have felt just as disturbed, just due to what's happening to our main character and to other characters in the story. Don't think I would ever choose to read a book like this again, just because it made me feel so dark inside. But I am gonna finish it just to see what it's about, so I will take you guys along with me as we finish this book. I'll give my thoughts and updates, but so far I'm definitely not liking this one as much as the first one. Those are my thoughts so far on Haunting and Hunting Adeline. My plan is to finish this one, and then I think next I'm gonna have to jump into something very lighthearted because, like I said, when I close this book, I just feel dark. So I think when I'm done with this one, I'm going to jump into Things We Hide from the Light because I know this one's gonna be a contemporary romance. I believe it's Grumpy Sunshine, and I don't know, I think this will kind of pull me out of the dark feeling that Hunting and Haunting Adeline have put me in. So we'll jump into this one. I think from there I'm gonna read Red Rising, and then I'm gonna finish off the video with the audiobook listen of Emma. That's just my plan for now, kind of how I'm feeling. Okay, update. It's now like a day or two later. I haven't read any more of Hunting Adeline, but I think I'm gonna jump around a little bit because I got a new Audible credit and I downloaded Things We Hide from the Light on Audible, and I kind of have a lot of chores to get done today, so I think I'm gonna listen to that and see how far I get, and then I'll jump back over to Hunting Adeline at some point to finish it in this video. But right now I just need to switch it up and read something light and happy, so we're gonna see how far into this I get while I'm doing my chores on the audiobook. Good morning, everyone. It is now the next day. I ended up getting like, I want to say like 6 or 7, maybe honestly even more than that, chapters into Things We Hide from the Light. So far, I'm liking it. I'm not loving it. I regret getting it on audiobook because I forgot that the first book, like, I knew there was some spice in it, but I forgot that it was like actually pretty spicy. And I'm just like in my room cleaning, listening to the audiobook, and then all of a sudden there's like words being said that I don't want to be hearing out loud. So that kind of threw me off guard because I totally forgot that that was like a significant aspect of this trilogy. This book follows Nash, who is the main male character's brother from the first book, and he's a police officer. And it's also following Lena, who we don't really have a lot of background on her yet, but I know she like has history with the family. And yeah, so far liking it, not loving it, but I'm definitely interested to keep listening to the audiobook and see if it gets any better. Right now I feel like it's just kind of dull and boring. Okay, it's update time, and excuse how crazy I look. I am so pale and I got out of the shower not that long ago, so my hair is kind of wet, but it has now been a couple days since I finished Hunting Adeline, and honestly I couldn't even string thoughts together to even be able to talk to you guys about it. So that's why I kind of just waited, slept on it for a couple days, trying to decide, I guess, what my review was. Like I said, first half of this book honestly just made me feel so dark and like icky, and it was not enjoyable to read. I still kept reading because I was about to say it was still entertaining enough for me to keep pushing, but entertaining's not even the right word. It was more just like I wanted to find out what happened next, and I wanted things to get better for the main character, so I kept reading because I was hoping to get to a point where things got better. And second half of the book, there definitely was a shift. Even then, the trauma that our main character was going through and we're knowing her inner monologue still just made me feel so dark. Like, the things happening in the second half weren't as disturbing. It was more just the dark romance element. I'm also trying to be vague because this is a spoiler-free video and I literally can't even begin to explain what was happening without giving away spoilers. Things did lighten up, if you could even say that, for the second half of the book, but our main character was still dealing with the repercussions of what she went through in the first half of the book, so I still, as a reader, felt very dark and sad, I guess, reading it. Overall, the ending that the two main characters got was like a satisfying ending. I enjoyed how it left off, but I don't know, I just wasn't obsessed with it, and too much of the book was the really dark stuff. I think I've settled on giving this book a 2. I considered a 1 or 1.5, but it wasn't like it was hard for me to get through it in the sense of like feeling slumped or feeling like I was bored with it. It was more just hard to get through because I kind of had to take breaks here and there to kind of reset my mind because of the way it was making me feel. And as you guys saw, I had gone ahead and started Things We Hide from the Light just because I needed something in between, almost like a palate cleanser between reading chapters of this book to keep me from feeling super icky. I feel like in order for me to give a book a 1 star, I have to really be like forcing myself through the book, and I definitely did not feel like that while reading this one. I've settled on a 2. I'm not even sure if that feels right, and I may change my mind about that, but that's what I logged it as on Goodreads. Definitely am glad I read these 2 books just because I learned some new things about myself as a reader, considering this isn't a genre I really have that much experience with in the past, and also this is considered to be one of the most controversial dark romances. I do not think I will ever choose to read books like this again in the future. I'm not opposed to dark romance, but specific triggers and tropes that take place in this book, if I know that's going to be in another book in the future, I will probably just choose to not pick it up. Kind of wish I would have just read the first book and left it at that, because I did somewhat enjoyed the first book. It was entertaining, whereas this one was honestly just dark and depressing and sad, and I felt really disgusting reading it. Props to you if you enjoy and can read books like that, but personally it's just not my taste. This duet of books is not something I would recommend to anyone, but if you are interested in reading it, like I've said, please look up trigger warnings. I have no more thoughts left about these. I probably will not ever think of these in the future, but I do feel accomplished knowing that I tackled and read them. I'm now going to switch over and fully focus on the audiobook of Things We Hide from the Light. I think in my last update I gave, I was saying how it kind of just felt dull and boring, and it's definitely not something I've been thinking about. Like, I'm never sitting here like, oh, I want to listen to more of the audiobook for that because I'm interested in what's happening. I definitely do not feel like that at all. I am still in kind of like the beginning chunk of the book. Nothing's really happening yet. I'm gonna force myself to push through it, and I'm really hoping I like it more than I am right now. I'm gonna try and get as close to halfway as I can in the next couple days, because I feel like once I'm really in the plot, it'll be more interesting and intriguing to me, and I'll give an update soon. I look so crazy right now, but I cannot remember the last update I gave. I think it might have been when I said I was going to try and get at least halfway through the audiobook, and that was yesterday, and I did do that. I think I'm around like 60% now. Things are starting to pick up. I'm starting to like it a lot more. This is one of the first contemporary romance books that I feel like the enemies to lovers trope is like truly being executed. I feel like normally in contemporary romances, they'll say it's enemies to lovers, but it's more just like they're annoyed with each other for a chapter or two, and then it's like insta love from there. But this one, they genuinely, like, there's a lot of tension and a lot of banter between the two of them, and they do have moments where they genuinely aren't getting along, even though they are attracted to each other. It's a lot more of a slow burn as a whole than I was expecting it to be, which I'm honestly really enjoying. At the beginning of the book, I was kind of annoyed because it felt really slow, but now that we're more like into the plot, I'm liking the slow burn aspect of the romance. But honestly, my favorite part right now is the girlfriendship dynamic between Sloane, Naomi, and Lena. It's so cute, and I love reading moments where like the three of them are hanging out. Currently, my only like bones to pick with it are that, one, it is feeling kind of slow and dragged out, and I feel like it could be a little bit more concise and still be a slow burn. And also there's some things that make me cringe, and I don't know if it's just because I'm hearing it on the audiobook and maybe I wouldn't notice that if I was reading, but like, for example, there's one part where it's like, there's no way that there's 3 alpha males that are all that attractive, like something like that, and I was just like icked out, honestly. And there's a lot of little lines like that that I find myself like kind of cringing at. Those are my only like little bones to pick with it. So far, I'm not like in love with it or obsessed with it, but it is really entertaining, and I find myself like wanting to know what's happening next. So there's a good possibility that I'll finish it today. I think I have like around 4 hours left in the audiobook. Right now, it's feeling like a 3-star read. Obviously, that could change depending on the ending of the book. There's also like a little bit of a crime, like mystery aspect to the book, so I could definitely see it ending on like some type of cliffhanger, but we'll see. I am liking it more than I was expecting to. Okay, update time, because I did finish Things We Hide from the Light, and I keep forgetting to give my final thoughts and kind of just like review on it. So first thing I will say is that I liked this significantly more than I was expecting to. There were definitely things that I wasn't a huge fan of, but I found myself genuinely interested in what was happening with the characters, and I was enjoying the romance. I've been back and forth between a 3-star and a 3.5 star, because when I initially closed this, in my head I was like, yes, it's a 3.5, but since I finished it, I have not thought about it once, so I think I'm gonna stick with a 3-star overall for this book. I am happily surprised with how much I enjoyed this, especially the second half of the book. Romance grew a lot more, the tension and banter were fantastic. The found family aspect of this was honestly probably my favorite part. Also, there was like this side plot the whole time of like mystery and a little bit like crime involvement. Hard to explain without giving spoilers, but I found myself really enjoying that and the way it tied into the central plot of the story. Definitely not my favorite book by any means, but while I was reading it, I had a really good time. It was pretty easy to get through. Obviously, I did the audiobook listen, and I think if I would have read it, it would have taken me a lot longer to get through it just because it is so thick. I'm pleasantly surprised. I did enjoy this one. Solid 3 stars. I can totally see why people are obsessed with this series, but I just don't think it's my absolute favorite. I will say I think I enjoyed this one more than the first book in the series, but it has been 2 years since I read the first one, so I honestly don't really remember much about it. But I did love getting glimpses of the couple from the first book, as well as glimpses of the couple in the next book. I will probably at some point read the third and final book in this trilogy, but it's not going to be anytime soon because, like I said, this just isn't something I'm ever thinking about, but while I'm in it, it is enjoyable. So that's another book I'm intimidated by, checked off this list. Let's move on to Red Rising. Good morning, everyone. It's been a couple days since my last update check-in, but I literally just realized I haven't given a check-in, so I wanted to pop on and kind of give my thoughts because the book is progressing so much in such a little amount of time that I want to remember to give my thoughts before I get too far into it. Right off the bat, I was really confused. There are so many terms used to describe their world right off the bat that really aren't explained. It's kind of just like thrown into the writing, and I will say I was a little bit irritated with that at first because I felt like I was reading gibberish. Like, I understood the characters, but I understood basically nothing about the world or the society structure. But I will say, as I kept reading, even though those things weren't explained in depth, they just sort of started to make more sense to me as they were talked about more. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free, so I can't really give examples, but the terminology used to describe this world is so complex, and that is exactly the reason I was scared of reading this book. For the first, I would say 50 pages, I was super just thrown off. I could understand the general premise of the politics of this world and the setting of where the character lived and what he did. Basically, everything else made no sense to me. There was also something extremely tragic that happened basically right off the bat in the book that literally ripped my heart out. I will say I did see this thing coming, and that could just be because I had already heard that there was something really sad that took place at the beginning of the book, and there's almost foreshadowing for specifically what that's going to be. I'm not saying the book was predictable, but I definitely could read the signs that that was going to happen, but that did not affect the way it impacted me emotionally. It felt like I would have had no clue that was even happening. That's how sad it was. And from there, the entire plot of the story has totally shifted into something else. I'm really impressed with how Pierce Brown was able to turn the plot and incorporate so much world building in such a little amount of time. And honestly, I'm at the point now where even though there are still some things that are confusing to me, it flows so easily and it's written so beautifully and the pacing is perfect. I don't know. I'm not having a hard time understanding the story or getting into it. That part is easy, but there are just little things here and there that I'm not understanding. I'm sure if I really took time to fully pick it apart and digest it, I could understand those things, but I don't feel like I'm missing out on the story because I'm still confused, if that makes sense. I also decided, as you may have seen in another clip, to annotate this book. One, because I have always said, even though I'm intimidated by this book, I really do think I'm going to enjoy it. And so I want to get the full experience out of it. So I decided just to annotate for that sole reason, because I feel like it'll help me be more immersed in the world. It'll help me pay more attention to things and definitely is helping me understand things more. I'm going to hopefully read more today and give you guys an update. But so far, I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. It is definitely very heavily sci-fi, but it's not bothering me. I'm actually really enjoying it, and it is very reminiscent to me of Ender's Game and The Hunger Games, which interestingly enough, there's a quote on the front of the book that says first Katniss and Ender, now Darrow. And Darrow is the main character of this book. Katniss obviously is The Hunger Games, and Ender is from Ender's Game. So it's interesting that that quote's on the front, and those are the two series that it's very heavily reminding me of. Hey y'all, update time, and ignore my hair. I need to go take a shower, but I'm about this much through the book. I'm on 168, and I feel like the last little bit I've been reading has just been so slow. And I don't know if it's just because when I first got into this book, I was really on a roll and pushing through it and reading it, so I was super invested in the story. But now I'm at the point that when I pick it up and I start reading it, I'm automatically confused again. It feels slow. It feels a little bit boring, and I don't know if I understood what was going on better, if I would find it more interesting, or if it really is just a slow plot. It was kind of crazy there for a minute, but now it's kind of slowed down, and what's happening in the plot feels like it should be exciting, but I honestly found the more mundane parts of the storyline earlier in the book to be more interesting and exciting than what's going on right now. There's a lot of action happening, but I just don't feel interested in it, so I'm really hoping it picks back up, and maybe I'm just in a lull since it's around the middle of the book, but it is making it kind of harder for me to push through. I was honestly expecting to have finished it by now, but I'm gonna keep reading and try to get a couple more chapters in, and hopefully the plot pace will pick up again. Update on Red Rising. I'm now on 281 and I'm liking it a lot more now. I think after my last update, it still continued to be pretty slow for a little while, and not gonna lie, I am still pretty confused about some things, but it's not affecting my understanding of the overall plot of the story, and I feel much more invested in it now. I think I'm going to be able to finish it tonight, and I can give my final thoughts and review. Let's talk about Red Rising. I finished this book last night. Plot definitely picked up a lot from whenever I had been saying it had kind of slowed down and was boring me and dragging. It definitely picked up a lot more, and there were some things that surprised me about it. Some really, really good plot twists that I was not expecting at all. I feel like because I was annotating this, looking for like symbolism and also parallels to modern society and things like that, I did have kind of an idea of the direction the plot was going to go in, just because there is so much symbolism, but I still did not guess the plot twists. Those really got me, and there were a lot of plot twists in like the last third of the book. There was also a plot line that I was not expecting at all between the main character and another character that I really enjoyed and feel like we will get more of in later books, and I'm really looking forward to that. I will say, even when I closed the book, there were still some things I was extremely confused about. I did end up looking up like a synopsis video on YouTube. It wasn't that long, like I haven't watched one like fully breaking down the world, but I watched a video kind of just re-explaining the plot of the first one, and I found by watching that it was like the middle chunk of the book that I understood the least, and I think that was because I was a little bit more withdrawn from it. So watching that video kind of helped, and it made a lot of things that happened in the second half of the book that I was more confused about make sense, if that makes sense. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of expecting to give this a 5-star, but I can't. I will say it is like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Objectively, based on how it was written, it is easily a 5 stars because the prose of this is just beautiful, and you can tell Pierce Brown has such meticulous writing and there's thought put into every single sentence. It's almost poetic reading it, which is a really interesting contrast compared to what's happening in the plot. But I just wasn't that invested in what was happening. I liked our main character, but I wasn't like super connected to him or any of the other characters. But this has very heavy dystopian elements, so I think we are meant, while reading it, to feel mixed feelings about the characters in the story. I'm a very character-driven reader, so because of my lack of connection with the characters, I can't give it a 5-star, but it still was a 4-star overall, just like based on how I felt about it, I would say. But given how great the writing was, that bumps it up for me, so I'm sticking with a 4.5 out of 5, and I will be continuing the series. So far, this has been the hardest one for me to get through, I would say, but that's just because the world building is so complicated and complex, so I almost wish there were other kind of more digestible sci-fis I could have read first to kind of get myself used to the genre. But either way, I did still enjoy it, and even though I was confused about things, I think I said this before, it didn't take away from my understanding of the overall plot. It was more just some nuances about characters and like smaller plot points that I was a little bit lost on. But overall, I did really enjoy it. 4.5 out of 5 stars for Red Rising. I also did go ahead and start the audiobook listen of Emma by Jane Austen last night, and I currently only have an hour left of it. I realized while listening to it today that I don't know if I'm listening to the full version of the book, because I found another version that's like 14 hours worth of audio, and then the version I'm listening to is 8 hours worth of audio, and it's an abridged version. So I looked that up, and basically it says that certain things are omitted from the book in order to make it make more sense in audio format. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but in the reviews for the specific one I'm listening to, it says that it is basically the exact same. So not really sure what's making the time on it less, but I'm honestly enjoying it so far. I'm kind of surprised by the portrayal of the main character because I often hear people say she's super insufferable, but I'm not disliking her that much. Obviously, I need to like see how the story ends, and I'm not very well versed in classics, so I feel like I can't really judge or critique the book too much. But right now I'm liking it. I'm not loving it. I definitely am glad I'm doing the audio because the way the story is told is definitely complicated, and I don't think I would be understanding it as in depth as I am if I was reading the book. Something I really like about the audio is that there's multiple voice actors, and then there's also like sound effects and music, so it really draws me into the story and kind of creates this ambiance, and I do think that's helping me understand it a lot more. To me, it's like kind of a dull plot. I'm not gonna sit here and pick it apart because I feel like I am not knowledgeable enough with classics to literally pick it apart, but just from like my base level analysis, I feel like the plot is kind of dull. Like, it's still interesting, but there's really nothing happening. It's kind of just like their daily lives, and I will probably finish it within the next hour because I think that's about how much I have left on the audiobook. Hello, it's probably about an hour and a half since my last update, and I have finished the audiobook of Emma by Jane Austen. I have a lot of thoughts because part of me was expecting to really enjoy this, and I think I was basing that off of the fact that I really, really loved Little Women. Like, I gave Little Women 5 stars. After kind of putting things into perspective, I just have to remind myself that even though they're both classics, Emma and Little Women, they're totally different classics, different authors, different time periods. So in one sense, I did feel a little bit let down by it because I wasn't in love with it the way I was with Little Women. But when I kind of take that perspective out of it and just look at it completely by itself, I did really enjoy it for what it was. I would say my personal rating for it would be like a 3-star. I know that it's a classic, and all the classic readers out there could probably argue with me as to why it is a 5-star read, but I base my ratings off of my enjoyment. I don't know how many times I'm gonna really think of it after finishing it. It's definitely not a read I was wowed by, if that makes sense. I do plan on watching the 2020 version of the movie adaptation to see if that kind of shifts my perspective at all, because obviously when I'm reading it and it is in a writing style I'm not used to, I am probably missing things that I should be getting. It was still a good book, but I just wasn't obsessed with it, if that makes sense. I am glad I read it though, one, because I've been dying to read that book simply because it's my name, literally, but also just because it helps me reach my goal of reading 5 classics this year, and I feel like that was a good one to add into the mix because the writing style is a little bit more difficult to digest than Little Women was, so I feel like I'm taking things in the direction of getting into the more complicated classics. But I do have a lot of thoughts on the main character. Essentially, all I kept hearing about this book and the main character, Emma, was that she's insufferable. She makes the story miserable to read because she is so horrible and annoying. And so I was going into this book fully expecting like a super unlikable character with no redeeming qualities. I figured that was probably the point of the story, is to read from an unreliable narrator or read from the perspective of someone who has a skewed view of the world. However, I did not really dislike the main character, and I feel like I could get flamed for saying that because it is a fairly general consensus that people do not like her. Yes, she was a little bit insufferable, but also like she's just a baddie. She loves to spill the tea, she loves the gossip, like she's just a girl. And given the time period it's set in, I can see where that is such a stark contrast compared to some of the other characters. But I found it very entertaining to read the story of a character who was so invested in other people's lives. Honestly, I view Emma, the main character from this story, as a very lonely character, and I think that a lot of her wrong actions were less of her just being a bad person and more of her just being lonely and trying with everything in her to preserve the relationships that she does have in her life. And honestly, having that perspective and opinion made the character more endearing to me. I don't know if that was Jane Austen's intention when writing this story, but right off the bat, that's how the character came across to me. I guess I just kind of felt for her, and I felt that she lacked friendship, so then when she did experience friendship, she was doing everything in her will to be able to preserve those friendships. And I don't know, even though she was meant to be this like annoying type of character, I found something about her so relatable, and that made her likable to me. And I found it relatable because she puts on this front of finery and wealth and the nicer things and kind of always turning a cold shoulder, when really the things she cares about most deeply are companionship with others, which is such a fundamental of human nature. So I almost found it refreshing to read about a character who comes across as insufferable but really truly and deeply cares about the same things that all humans do. I have heard people critique the character by saying she just has this like annoying uppity personality that's really arrogant, but to me that uppity personality was more a reflection of self-preservation and not wanting to get hurt and not being willing to be vulnerable, and less a reflection of arrogance. I will say one big theme with the main character is that she refuses to accept that she's wrong, but I love her for that. Like, she's just a baddie, and I don't know why people hate on her. I'm sure in the time period that this was written, she was meant to be an unlikable character, but honestly, like, good for her for knowing what she wants and not accepting any less. I highly enjoyed her as a character. The story overall was a little bit dull to me. I didn't really feel like the plot was that exciting. I cannot believe this video has finally come to an end. I have read like 5 books that I was super intimidated by, and it has taken me a lot longer than I thought it would. This video idea has forced me to super get out of my comfort zone in multiple different genres, and I do not regret reading any of the books that I did read for this video. A quick little recap. I first started with Haunting and Hunting Adeline. I believe I gave Haunting Adeline 3 stars, and I gave Hunting Adeline 2 stars. Like I've already said in the video, wouldn't necessarily recommend those to anyone, but if you are interested in reading them, definitely look up trigger warnings. And I also wish I would have just read the first book and never dove into the second one. Then I read Things We Hide from the Light. Was not expecting to really like it at all. It ended up being better than I thought it would be. I think I wound up giving it a 3-star or somewhere around there. It was a cute, fun, easy rom-com. I will say a little bit too long for my taste, but I still had a good time reading it. Next, I went into Red Rising, which was the most difficult read of this entire video, but I'm so proud of myself for tackling that book, and especially for annotating that book. I'm really glad I did that because it really helped me to dive into the world. Like I said earlier in the video, I was expecting to give it a 5-star, and it definitely was not a 5-star for me, but it was a 4.5. The writing was fantastic, the plot was exciting and enjoyable for the most part, and I'm excited to see where the series goes from here and to see if I like it better in future books. And then lastly, I read Emma by Jane Austen. I believe that's now my 3rd classic of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and if you stuck around this long, especially thank you, because I know this is going to be a long one. Be sure to check out the other videos on my page. I have other reading challenges, TBR videos, monthly reading wrap-ups, tons of other stuff, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it would really help me out. And specifically comment if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or what books you're intimidated to read. I'll also have my TikTok and Instagram linked in the description below if you'd want to follow me over there, because I'm posting content on both of those platforms very frequently. I feel so accomplished. Like, this might be my favorite video I've ever filmed, and maybe I'll make a part 2 of this at some point in the future when I have another list of books I'm intimidated by. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.